Hey leaders, welcome to the People Power Project podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Carey, CEO of Morgan Carey Consulting Solutions, Chief HR Strategist, and advocate for building better workplaces. This podcast is all about empowering the leader in you, whether you're an individual contributor, a manager, or a business owner, to build better, safer, and more enjoyable work environments. Together, we'll reinvent HR and develop outstanding leadership by promoting accountability and exploring ways to foster growth for the busy business leader. Thinking about a career in HR, or maybe you're already in the field but looking for guidance on how to level up? Trying to get the HR job for HR experience and they're asking you for previous HR experience? The MCCS People Power Project Circle is your go-to resource for HR career growth, whether you're transitioning into HR or looking to sharpen your expertise. We provide mentorship, career coaching, and real-world HR solutions to help you navigate the path to success. Don't just dream about your HR career, build it yourself, just like I did. Visit morgancareyconsulting.com to learn more and join the community today. I'm so excited today because joining me is a very powerful guest. What she has and is accomplishing in her life's journey is so inspiring and influential, and I'm just so happy to talk to her today about the purposeful pivot. She helps people discover and pursue their purpose. She is a mother, U.S. Air Force veteran, best-selling author, keynote speaker, talk show host, and educator. She has extensive experience in public administration, human resources management, workforce development, and training, and you know that is near and dear to my heart. That's in my wheelhouse. She has a bachelor's in human resources management and a master's in public administration from Bellevue University in Nebraska, and she completed a doctor of management and executive leadership from Colorado Technical University in 2016. She is the founder of Purpose Today Global LLC and believes our profession should align with our purpose as well as our passion. She hosts a talk show called Purpose Today, which airs weekly on the Daily Gospel Network. She is Dr. April Dobson. Welcome to the show, Dr. April.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for having me on the show. I'm excited. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm so glad you're here. Can you tell us where you're joining us from today?
Absolutely. I am joining from San Antonio, Florida. It's just north of Tampa.
Okay. At one point I thought I wanted to live in Florida because I like warm weather. I'm a warm weather girl, and Virginia is just disappointing. We got the warm weather. It gets hot here, but it also gets really cold and rainy and gray in the wintertime. So that
I'm
is not my
familiar.
favorite.
I used to live in Virginia, so I know.
Did you? What part of Virginia did you live in?
So I've lived in Virginia on more than one occasion. So I've been in Northern Virginia,
Okay.
in Vienna and Ashburn, and I also
Okay.
have lived in the Newport News, Virginia Beach
Okay.
area as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, nice. Absolutely. I work in DC, so I go through that Northern Virginia area, that Northern Virginia traffic quite a bit. I know you know what that's like.
I do.
Yes. But Dr. April, we got a whole lot to talk about today in a little bit of time, and we don't want to keep the people too long. So let's get started. Okay?
Hello.
So many professionals pivot for the wrong reasons. And today we're talking about a purposeful pivot. Sometimes people will pivot for burnout, frustration, or simply chasing an opportunity that doesn't truly resonate with them. But a pivot without purpose is just a detour, isn't it? You're like going all over the place, no direction, don't know where you're going. So today we're talking about how to make sure your next move is aligned, intentional, and transformative so it's the most impactful. You know that saying, make your next move your best move?
Yes, I do.
It's so true because pivoting without purpose can cause a whole lot of problems, wasted time, energy, efforts, just a mess. And we want to go through life not trying not to make messes, right?
Right.
So, Dr. April, like I said, we got a lot to talk about, a little bit of time. So we're gonna get into it. Can you give us a little? I know I read your bio, read a lot of things, right? But I want you in your own words to give us a little bit about your background. It's so rich. Just give us a little bit of your journey and how each step built on the other one.
Absolutely. So I spent 11 years in the Air Force on active duty, had a wonderful career, was assigned overseas, my first duty station in Germany, and I've had other assignments, domestic assignments throughout that 11-year career. I spent most of my career in Intel, and during my career, I did a special duty assignment in recruiting, and that was how I learned that I was really passionate about HR. I love
Mhm.
helping people. And I decided early on in my Air Force career that whenever I left the Air Force, I was going to switch careers, whenever that might be. So when I left the Air Force in 2009 after an MEB, I transitioned to HR. And when I was telling my mom that I was going to switch careers to HR, she discouraged it, but she came back a few years later and apologized because she said, I don't think there's any money in HR. And we'll talk a little bit about like what's important to look at when you pivot a little
Yeah.
later. But
Mhm.
she came back and apologized years later. And so I switched careers post military and have had, just an opportunity to serve in a lot of different capacities in government. I've done HR consulting. And
Mhm.
so for me, as I aligned what I was doing with my purpose and with my passion, I saw a change and it changed my trajectory. And so I currently am in a branch chief position, and I oversee a team of senior HR policy specialists who advise our agency on HR policy matters and who write HR policy
Yeah.
for our bureau. And so it's been
Mhm.
an amazing journey because of my desire to help people discover their purpose and pursue their purpose. I recently launched Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson. It's a talk show that you mentioned
Uh-huh.
earlier. And also recently launched Purpose Today Global LLC. So that's just a little bit more about me and how my journey
Yeah.
has changed throughout the years.
And I hear a lot of pivots in there, a lot of movement, right? And so we're going to talk about like how did you come to do that and what kind of the next question is like what is the biggest mindset shift you've had to make during your transitions? Maybe from your military service to civilian because you did some HR kind of things in the military, but then do you feel like there's a mindset shift from military service to civilian HR leadership and what is that? What's the shift?
So I will say that the biggest shift should be having the mindset that you do what you love, what you're passionate about, and what your purpose to do. I think that is the biggest shift. I think there are a lot of skills that come, in the military. We're taught leadership. We're taught adaptability, being agile.
Yeah,
But in the military, you're not necessarily encouraged to do what you love because you may have a career field that is sort of selected for you.
yeah,
So I think for me and a lot of people who I've met, it's important to ensure that you're not stuck doing something because that's what you're trained to do, that's what you were taught to do, that's what you have
yeah,
expertise in. So I think that's the biggest thing, and being able to embrace who we authentically are and being able to embrace what we're purposed to do, and we can do that and enjoy what we do and love what we do when we embrace what we're purpose to do and what we're passionate about.
yeah. So true, so true. Now, many leaders, they often feel stuck, and they don't know if they should pivot or not, or just keep pushing through whatever they're dealing with. You kind of touched on this just now. So, how can they really recognize when it's time to make that move? Or is it just the feeling of being stuck? I know for me, I've known when it was time to move when I just felt like I don't know what else to do. I feel like I've exhausted things here. That's my trigger. But what do you think how do they know? How do they recognize it?
Yes, and I think there's a few things that they can look at. And one of the things that you said, I think people need to make sure that they're not ignoring, because most of the time when someone feels like they need to pivot, they really need to pivot, right? When they
Yeah.
feel that way. But there are some things that people can, analyze, some things that they can look at. They want to, just check first to see is what they're doing aligned with what they're passionate about, what they feel purpose to do. That's one question that is going to be key. And if those things align, they want to also look at whether or not they have done all they can do in the position that they're in.
Yeah.
Are they stagnant, right? So, and are they stagnant because they are not taking the opportunity to invest in them, in themselves and others, right? To ensure that they're growing and other people are growing. Are they taking the opportunities that present to be challenged, or are they just merely running away from the challenges that, that they have? So I think that's important for people to do as well. And I think it's also important to evaluate what they've done to prepare the next leader. Right?
Yeah.
Have you been really actively investing in others and working on a succession plan? I think those are some things. But the critical one is finding out whether or not they align with their purpose and their passion. And that's the
Absolutely.
biggest. That's the biggest.
Absolutely, and you just making sure it's not an emotional reaction, because sometimes we get in this mode, especially on jobs, right? If something could happen today where I'm like, "I don't think I'm supposed to be working here. I'm getting out of here. Let me start." I I know some people that are like, as soon as something happens, that's when they start getting on LinkedIn like mad. Like, I'm on LinkedIn today because I don't know, something crazy happened. But when things are good or just calm for the day, they're not so busy trying to find another job. For those people, what would you say there if they have 1 minute where they're like, I really want to get out of here because this bad thing happened today. And this may not be the first time it happened. It's the first time this month, but it happened again. It happened before the month before. I'm getting out of here. But then as soon as they calm down a little bit, they're no longer looking.
Well, I think they really need to stop and take some inventory, right? Because sometimes we have certain experiences because we're the change agent who's supposed to
Yeah.
bring about change in that area. So they really have to ask themselves, have I done everything that I can do in this scenario? Because
Yeah.
sometimes everything isn't about someone else. Sometimes things are about how can we develop ourselves and how
Yeah.
can we grow. I think if a person just runs and leaves a situation because it's undesirable or because something bad happened, if they don't face the root of that issue head on, chances
Yeah.
are they're going to deal with the same thing in another environment. It's just going to be
Yeah.
different people in a different workplace. So I think they have to stop and take some personal inventory to see have they done everything that they can do about the things that they're observing. Sometimes we're the people who see things that happen because we're the person who is purposed to do something about it. We're the person who actually can introduce a strategy, or we can introduce something, for change.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the biggest things as well. So they need to really look at, have they taken efforts to introduce a strategy to change it? And if they're not the leader who can make that decision, have they partnered with, other stakeholders and other leaders to identify a solution? So if they
Yeah.
find that they're doing those things and nothing is still happening and they've done everything that they can do,
Yeah.
then they can evaluate whether or not, it's time for them to pivot. I'm a person of faith. I think it's also important to pray about your next moves. And
Yeah.
and sometimes in that prayer, you find that no, it's not time for you to move yet. You need to stay. And sometimes you find that, yes, it is time for you to move, but here's what you need to do before you go. And here's the types of opportunities that you need to look at. So I think those things need to be,
Yeah.
analyzed, and we need to be honest with ourselves,
Yeah.
to identify, why do I feel this way? Right.
Yes.
So I think that's really important.
And listen to that good counsel, because there's been times when I'm talking to God and I'm like, is this what I was supposed to be doing? I know that has happened to me in the past. And he's like, yeah, you're in the right place. He said those words to me more than once. You're in the right place. Sometimes I'm like, oh, come on, God.
Yes.
I feel like I'm ready to make a move. He's like, sit still, you know? And you and I both believe that purpose and leadership go hand in hand, right? And I often talk about, I get the opportunity now, and I haven't always been able to say this, that where I work on my regular, I know I talk about Morgan Carey Consulting Solutions, but people who follow me know I'm also a director at a beautiful little charter school in DC. And where I work now, I get to be able to say, I love what I do, I love where I do it, and I love who I do it for. And I really believe that's so important because I'm a leader. I lead a team as well. And I really believe, because I love what I do, I love where I do it, and love who I do it for, that it makes me a better leader. I can
Absolutely.
go to work every day wanting to be there. And because I want to be there, that kind of the things that I do, it gets transmitted. That joy of being there, I transmit it to the people on my team. And sometimes they're like, "Oh, Morgan, I love working for you." And I don't know if they always know what elements it is that makes it that they love to work for me. Of course, I think I got a great personality and I care about them and things like that, but how do I get to show that to them? I think being able to show up in a place that I like to show up and doing something that I like to do has a whole lot to do with that. What do you think?
Yes. Yes, that is so good. And you said something that's key, loving what you do. And I
Yeah,
think when people feel that it's time to move on, they need to go back to are
yeah,
they doing what they love?
yeah,
Because if they're not doing what they love, then it doesn't matter how many times you evaluate, whether or not you just
absolutely.
are frustrated with the situation. If you're not doing what you love, that's a problem in and of itself. But when you're doing what you love and you appreciate what you love, you find a way that you can serve the people where you are while you're there. And I
Yeah,
think that's an important part of leadership. And then I think we didn't talk about this, but another thing I think that's important to do when they're in those situations and they're thinking, hey, it's time for me to leave, we should always have several mentors and,
yeah,
people who are where we desire to be, people who have already been successful with where we are and where we're going, right? And
hmm,
I think sometimes you just have to sit down and talk to a mentor, and
yeah,
maybe they can give you another perspective and some things to consider and some steps that you can consider taking that maybe you didn't consider taking. So I think that's important for leaders too, to
yeah,
have mentors who can advise them and give them some
absolutely.
wise counsel.
Absolutely, because it's not always sunshine and rainbows. So, and just
Right.
because it's not sunshine and rainbows doesn't mean it's time for you to pivot. When I first got to my job, we were in transition, and whenever you in transition and growing, there are usually growing pains associated with that. And the way I'm wired, I was kind of like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? But if I had pivoted too soon, right, I really would not have be able to say what I just said, and I wouldn't be in this place because where I work has a whole lot to do with that. So, what advice would you give managers and aspiring leaders who may feel they're not in the right role, or they're afraid to make a change, or not quite sure that they should make the change?
So, one of you asked several different things. So, being in the right role, you have to stop and take some personal inventory, right? So, if you've determined that you're not doing something that you love and it doesn't align with what you're passionate about and what your purpose to do, then of course, it's definitely time for you to pivot. But people need to take personal inventory. They need
Yeah,
to look to see what is it that I love, what is it that I'm passionate about, and I think sometimes people aren't sure. So I think a great
yeah.
question that people can ask themselves is what is it that I would enjoy doing even if I didn't get paid to do it? And I'm not
Oh,
saying people should work without pay. And I
yes.
talk a little bit about it in one of my books in the autonomous career. But you have to evaluate what is it that you could do even if you didn't get paid for it.
Yeah.
And that list should not be very long. People should only have one, two, or three things that they would be willing to do and not get
For
paid
free.
for it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
once you realize what it is, and it's not necessarily identifying a certain job, but what are the tasks? What are the things that you could do without getting paid for it? Then you want to ask yourself, what skills do you have? What knowledge do you have? Even if you haven't formally done something in a professional setting, you have
Yeah.
skills related to whatever it is that you could see yourself doing. And then
Mhm.
taking that inventory of what skills, what expertise, what knowledge and education do I have that aligns with, what I feel like I could be doing. And then you can put together a list of possibilities because there's a lot of different ways that we can
Yeah.
pursue our purpose. It's a lot of different ways that we can do something that we're passionate about, right?
Yeah.
And then once you have that list, then you do another assessment as to whether or not you need to close any gaps. It's a possibility that you may need to either volunteer in an organization or take on some different roles and responsibilities where you are now
Yeah.
to really expand, and grow. And then you start looking for those opportunities. I recommend informational interviews to talk to some people who are already doing that and have been successful, and then you can draft the plan of what's necessary for you to make that pivot.
Yeah. Now, you said something, informational interviews. That stuck out
Yes.
to me. So what does that look like? Does that mean like applying for jobs and going on these interviews that you're not going to get, or is it just talking to people that you know?
So great question, Morgan. So informational interviews is talking to people who are already in the industry or position or who already have the type of
Mhm.
business that you desire to launch or to grow. And so you can start with people in your circle. You can start with people who you can start with friends and family who have that type of business or that type of role, right? And you put a list of questions together. There are certain questions that you should be asking. How did they get into that industry? What is it that they love about it? What does a day in the life look like? And then anything that you just want to know, right?
Yeah.
And once you've exhausted your connection, of course, you always ask people, who else do you think I should talk to? People can also look on LinkedIn and search for people who, have that title or who are in that industry or who are at a company that they aspire to partner alongside or work for, and
Yeah.
and ask if they have time. 30 minutes or so for an informational interview. Go in with questions written down. Take
Mhm.
notes during the
Yeah.
informational interview, and it's not a time to ask for a job. It's an opportunity to ask questions that you want to know. You can ask about shadow opportunities, but people shouldn't be asking for a job in an informational interview. But those
Yeah.
are things that people can do to get more insight and help them make a decision.
Now, somebody may be listening or watching, right? And they're like, you know what, Dr. April and Morgan, this all sounds really, really good, but I am like 15 years into my career. I don't really like it, but I make a certain amount of money. I got family. How am I going to just up and transition to something else? Is there another way to pivot where I don't have to lose so much? There's a lot of uncertainty and fear that comes along with this idea of pivoting. So a lot of times when we're uncertain and fearful, we don't do anything, right? And so I could just see or hear that question in somebody's mind. And now they're like, this doesn't apply to me. This episode doesn't apply to me because I can't do that. What do you say to them?
So, pivoting doesn't mean that you're losing salary or you're losing income, right? It just means you're shifting directions.
Yeah.
And if someone is a leader is a leader is a leader, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you can be a leader in so many different environments and you can switch industries without having to compromise your salary, without having to lose out on anything. I think we lose out when we're not pursuing what we're purposed to do and what we're passionate about. And so, when I talked a little bit earlier about doing that inventory, once a person has really assessed, here's what I could do without getting paid for it, right? When they make that assessment, that allows them to determine what they could do and get paid for it, right? So they do the listing of, these are the skills that I have. This is what's required for what I desire to do. And oftentimes they can make that transition without losing any income.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in a lot of different instances. And I'll use an example of someone who I was in my doctoral program with. He was a senior leader in the Army before he left active duty, a senior intelligence officer, had done intel pretty much almost all 20 years of his career in the Army.
Mhm.
And he said, I don't want to do that anymore. And so we had a conversation and I asked a series of questions. And some like the questions that I just mentioned. And when I talked to him and we delved into what he enjoyed improving processes, improving programs, and
Mhm.
really developing people. He was able to get a program manager position, nothing related to Intel, right?
Mhm.
Post military, making more than what he made in the military, right?
He spent
So,
all that time doing
and
other
he
things.
and he did not know that that was even possible.
Yeah.
So I think people might need to talk to a coach, you
Yeah.
know. They might need to
I'm
talk to
so good.
somebody who can help them build
Yeah.
that bridge, but
Yeah.
it's possible. You're not necessarily starting from the bottom. You're
Yeah.
starting from what you've already built. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that I think people need to keep in mind.
I think that might be a misconception that pivoting means starting over, right?
Right.
And I wanted to make that point today that pivoting doesn't mean that you're starting over. It does mean that you might need to get strategic, get a
Right.
coach, make a list, have some conversations with some people, find some mentors. You got to do some work. You're going to have to, what we like to say, lock in. You got to lock in. If you know that, this thing right here is not the thing you want to do. So it's like, what's the best next step, right? Get strategic, lock into what you want to do. It doesn't mean you're going to lose, right? But I know that pivoting comes along with some uncertainty and fear. Just don't let the uncertainty and fear stop you because it's not going anywhere. It's going to be right there. You got to take the steps with the uncertainty and fear.
Absolutely.
I use the word strategy, like get strategic. And you mentioned getting a coach and things like that in order to make the decision and move. But again, I said when you transition and when you're in a time of growth, there may be some growing pains, maybe some hiccups. So you got to stay resilient. What are some strategies that you think people can use in order to stay resilient and maintain clarity during these times?
Absolutely. I think one of the things people can do to remain resilient is to focus on their goals and focus on what's important to them. And I think having mentors can also be helpful. I think what we listen to and what we watch can
Mm,
be very, very key,
yeah,
right? And it everything doesn't always have to be a formal training. They can watch YouTube videos. I mean, the People Power Project is a great podcast for them to watch to help
thank
with
you.
resiliency and
Tune in.
encouragement and focus. Purpose Today is another one. But I think
Absolutely.
really finding resources, finding things that inspire you, hearing the right thing, seeing the right thing, taking the right things in, having accountability partners, and that can be in the way of a coach. It can be in the way of a friend or, someone else who is going to hold you accountable to what you want to do. Having a vision board is really important. When you
Mm,
can put what you want on paper and then put steps that you need to achieve those things and come back and revisit it. I think all those steps can be very helpful to help people to remain focused. And I do
yeah,
want to add too, you talked about sometimes people having fear. I think it's important to push past the fear, stay focused,
yeah,
because sometimes if we don't do what we need to do and pivot when we need to pivot, sometimes things will then happen to force us to do that because we refuse to do it on our own.
yeah,
So I think it's really important to take those steps to stay focused,
yeah.
ensure that we're putting the right information in so that we can do what it is that we have the desire to do.
Yes, because like I said, fear is going to be there, right? Sometimes people look at you accomplishing things. I read your bio in the beginning. You got a whole list of things that you've done and you're doing and going to continue to do. So people see the outcome, right? They see you looking all
Right.
good on podcast screen, on your talk show screen, and like, man, she did that. And they don't think that there was like fear and uncertainty. They don't, or either they don't think about it because they see the finished product or whatever the product is at the time. Right? But it's there. It is there. I tell you, one of my biggest fears going to basic training was the gas chamber.
Wow.
I was on the bus on the way to basic training, scared to death, but I wasn't scared about the entire training. I was scared about this one thing. I was scared about the gas chamber, and it was the worst experience for me. For me, it was the worst experience. I think it increased my claustrophobia. I really do. But however, the point is, I didn't let it stop me. I went scared. I was so scared. I was nervous about being without my family, nervous about being far away, nervous about, what is this? I didn't have a military background, like a family that could tell me what I had one friend that I was close to that could kind of tell me. And she was the one that talk to me about the gas chamber, but it didn't help talking about it. I was still just as scared. I was just as scared. But it's like you do it anyway, and then before you know it, it's over. And even if the experience was as bad as you thought it was going to be, you've now accomplished the thing, right? But
Right.
you keep your eyes on the purpose because my purpose was to finish. I needed this, and I talked about in another episode that the reason why I went to the military was because I was broke. I was completely broke, and I was like, it's so something's got to give. Something has to give." And then I saw a commercial, and the commercial was for the military, and I was like, "Hey, what if I do that?" 2 weeks later, I was gone. You know, but
Wow.
the the goal was to go and do something that I couldn't quit and make some money. Right. And so I would love to tell people that I did it to serve my country. That was my reason. That wasn't the reason why I went. I love that I served my country, but I went because I wanted to do something that I had to stick to and at the same time make some money. Yeah, right. And so that was the goal. And the purpose is what drove me. So can you share a time when purpose continued to guide you even when you really wanted to quit or didn't want to start in the first place?
So I think that's a great question. I'm gonna probably say my doctoral program.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
I
you
hear
know,
that. I got friends with those
because, you
degrees.
know, I went into it, I had a reason that I decided to pursue a doctorate degree. And, my initial reason was because I had a desire to do senior executive service later in my
Mhm.
career. And so I felt that it would be necessary, right? And, with everything that I was planning to do with just growth and government in general, I felt that it would be helpful. And so during my doctoral program, a lot of people don't realize that I became a presidential management fellow while I was in the doctorate program.
Okay.
So I finished a year of my doctorate program. It was a 3-year program, and then
Mhm.
became a presidential management fellow, which is a 2-year program. And the PMF program requires 80 hours of training for the program each year.
You had a
And
lot to do.
then my doctorate program was 96 credit hours. And so I was doing the second, and third year of the doctoral program while I
Wow.
was a PMF. And I had moments that I asked myself, why did I do this to myself? And I think, for me, what kept me going was the purpose behind what I was doing. And that
Yeah.
was why I stayed focused and I was able to get through it. But that was a challenge, like during my doctoral program. And so I know that that's a professional example with my,
Mhm.
with my degree. But I've had other instances that my purpose is what kept me
Yeah.
going, even with some health challenges that I had in
Yeah.
2022. And I won't go into all that, but really at the end of the day, we have to stay focused and look at what our end goals are.
Yeah, yeah. What is the goal? And to keep pushing past that, because I always say at the end of the day, what else really are you going to do? Right? That's
Yeah.
how I keep myself going. Is asking myself this question, like, okay, Morgan, if you don't keep going, what are you gonna do? Right. And so if I think about the alternative, I know it sounds so simple, and I make it sound real simple, but if I think about the alternative of not pivoting or not doing the thing, it's like those consequences are greater than kind of going through the fire of what I think is gonna be a fire, because not every pivot is really hard. It's just the idea that you have to do it. It's the fear of the unknown. I know in the HR profession, sometimes I see professionals like kind of force fit themselves into whatever role because HR is big and it's vast. There's a lot of areas you
Right.
can function in HR. And sometimes people will be like, okay, I decided I'm gonna be a recruiter. I'm just gonna recruit, and they stay right there. And then they don't really even like it, and they just stay there. Before you know it, they don't like the whole profession. I don't like HR at all. And I'm thinking, well, what did you do? You just did recruiting. You don't like recruiting. There's so much more you can do. And maybe the recruiting aspect doesn't align with your true strengths. You know?
Yes.
Yeah. 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 So I want to know, what would you tell someone in front of you right now and they're struggling to pivot, right? And they don't feel like they're doing what they were meant to do. What would be the very next thing you tell them to do? That's all you know. I'm struggling to pivot, but I know that I am not in the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. What would you say to them next?
So, I think the thing that I would say to them is, because you're struggling with pivoting, you know you're not doing what you need to be doing, you have to make the decision that you're going to pivot, because that's unnecessary stress. Like doing
Yeah.
something that you don't enjoy is unnecessary stress. It's not good for your body. It's not helping you. So you have to stop and take a moment and really ask yourself, why is it that you're holding on to something that I'm just going to say it. Why are you holding on to something that you hate?
Yeah.
It is not, it's not serving you by any means. So the first thing that you need to do is make the decision that you're letting it go.
Let it
Right?
go.
That's the first thing, is making the decision. There will be a load of relief by just making that decision. And then go into those questions that I said earlier. What is it that you could see yourself doing that you would be happy doing, even if you didn't get paid for it, right? And what do you have? What strengths do you have? You talked about strengths, Morgan, that you can bring to the table that ties with doing those things that you would love to do. And then what's available? Is there something out there, or do you need to, create a business? What is it? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if the decision is not made to pivot, then they're going to continue to feel stressed, and it'll get to being overwhelmed and all of these things. So I think it's better to be proactive, make those decisions, pivot, instead of being reactive to something happening that requires you to do that in the end anyway.
Yeah, I love that. One thing I wrote down, I've been taking notes since you've been talking, because you've been dropping some gems, some knowledge, and I love to hold on to knowledge. Don't hold on to things you hate, though. I love that. I love that right there, because what is the reason you're doing that?
Yeah.
And you have to figure out, am I holding on to this because I'm scared? Am I comfortable? All of those things. And if I hate it, why do I have it?
Yeah.
Why do I have it? It's not serving me.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much. We could go on all day. I want to thank you so much for being here. But before we go, I want you to tell the listeners, how can they connect with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they can connect with me on Facebook. It's April Diane Dobson, Dyann, and Dob as in boy, SON. So April, just like the month.
Mhm.
They can follow me on YouTube on the Purpose Today channel. So it's at Purpose Today. They can also connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Dr. April D. Dobson on LinkedIn. And I'm also on Instagram, Dr. April D. Dobson and April D. Dobson. So either of those is how they can connect with me.
Absolutely. And make sure you all are checking the show description, because all that information is going to be on there. So you can just click it and get right to Dr. April. Dr. April, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm sure our listeners got some insights and helpful tips for their journey, because your journey, wisdom, and purpose-driven leadership, it is so needed in this world. It's so needed right now. And I want to thank you for sharing all the things that you shared today. I want my listeners to know that great leadership isn't just about what you do at work. It is about who you are and how you are continuing to grow. So who are you becoming in all of your endeavors? Every time you invest in yourself, you're also investing in the people around you. This is why you're a leader. You're investing in the people around you and the workplace culture that you create. And we're all about creating better workplaces. So take a moment to reflect. Is it time for you to change? Is it time for you to pivot? Or are you resisting a pivot that could lead to something better? Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast but didn't know where to begin? Or maybe you started one, but you're struggling to grow your audience or make money from it? That's where my 7-Figure podcast comes in. With this program, you'll get access to step-by-step course, a supportive community of podcasters just like you, weekly live Q&As, and Wednesday lives to guide you through every part of your podcast journey. I love, love, love this group. So whether you're just getting started or ready to take your show to the next level, this is your chance to make podcasting work for you. Use the link in the show description to sign up today. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, a coworker, or even your manager. And don't forget to subscribe to the People Power Project podcast for more inspiring and actionable episodes. Follow me on Instagram at Morgan_Carey Consulting and tag me with your thoughts using hashtag People Power Project Podcast. Until then, remember, people-empowered workspaces are simply the best workplaces. I'll see you next week.